The lights in the transit corridor die all at once, and I know before anything else happens that this was planned. My name is Ethrin Vale. I am the voice heir of the Threll Dominion, the last living daughter of a line that has ruled for 11 generations, and I have spent my whole life being told that the 4 soldiers walking beside me would die before they let harm reach me. I believed it the way I believed the sun would rise. I believed it the way children believe their parents will always come home. So when the corridor goes dark and the 4 guards around me turn, not outward to face a threat, but inward to face me, my mind refuses to understand what my eyes are seeing. Commander Voss is the first to raise his weapon. He is the guard who taught me to walk without fear through crowded halls, who once carried me on his shoulders through a garden on my homeworld when I was small enough to fit there. His face, lit only by the pale glow of his rifle display, shows no anger and no hesitation. That is the part that frightens me most. There is no rage in what he is doing. There is only calculation. Voice heir, he says, and his voice is calm, almost gentle. This will be quick. I step back before I even decide to move. My back finds the cold wall of the corridor, and I understand, in the space of one heartbeat, that there is nowhere left to go. The other 3 guards fan out slowly, unhurried, the way predators move when they know their prey has nowhere to run. I search their faces for some sign that this is a mistake, a misunderstanding, a test. I find nothing. They have already decided. They decided before tonight, before this hallway, before the moment the lights went dark. I think of my father, of the treaty vote happening 3 levels above us, of the words I was supposed to deliver tomorrow to the assembled delegates of a dozen worlds. I think that none of it will matter if I die in this hallway with no one to see it happen. Then a voice cuts through the dark, low and steady, coming from behind Voss. Step away from her. It is not a Threll voice. It carries a strange, flat calm that does not match the terror climbing up my throat, a calm that sounds almost bored, as if the man speaking has said these words 100 times before and expects to say them 100 times again. I do not recognize him at first, not by name, though I have seen him before. He is one of the human soldiers assigned to station security, a quiet man who stands near doorways and says little. I never learned his name. I never thought I needed to. Voss turns his head only slightly, unbothered. This is not your matter, soldier. Walk away, and no one will remember you were here. I already know you're going to say that, the human says. I've heard it before. It's always a lie. There is a sound then, sharp and short, and one of the 3 guards behind Voss staggers, the servo joints in his armored leg locking as something small and fast strikes the seam at his knee. It happens too quickly for me to understand what I saw. The human soldier is already moving, closing the distance between himself and the 4 guards who were sworn to protect me, and there is nothing in his stride that looks like fear. Voss fires. I feel the heat of the shot pass close enough to warm the side of my face, and I understand, with a clarity that makes my knees weak, that the shot was meant for me. It was aimed at the space where my head had been a half-second earlier. The only reason I am not lying on the floor of this corridor is that the human soldier stepped into that space instead, and the shot that should have ended me instead strikes him high in the shoulder. He does not fall. He does not even slow down. I watch him absorb the blow the way a wall absorbs a wave, and I watch him close on Voss with a speed that should not be possible for a body that has just taken a plasma round meant to kill. He does not use elaborate movements or grand gestures. Everything he does is small, efficient, almost unremarkable, and yet within seconds Voss is on the ground and the 2 remaining guards are reconsidering their approach. "Get behind me," the human says to me, without turning his head, as if he can somehow see me without looking. I do not move. My body has forgotten how. "Now," he says, and something in the single word reaches through my shock and pulls me forward. I stumble toward him, and he shifts his weight so that his uninjured shoulder is between me and the remaining guards, as naturally as if we had rehearsed this 1,000 times. One of the 2 remaining guards, A younger soldier named Carr, who has served on my detail for less than a year, hesitates. I see it in the way his weapon dips, in the way his eyes flick toward Voss on the ground, and then toward me. For a moment I think he might break from whatever plan brought them here. "Carr," Voss says from the floor, his voice tight with pain but still commanding, "finish this." Carr's weapon rises again. I feel my chest tighten, waiting for the end. But the human soldier is already moving, closing the gap before Carr can steady his aim, and there is a brief, controlled exchange, more like a conversation between two bodies than a fight, and then Carr is disarmed and pressed against the corridor wall, his weapon skidding across the floor and coming to rest near my feet. The last guard makes a decision I did not expect. He runs. For a moment there is only silence, broken by my own ragged breathing and the low hum of the station's damaged lighting trying to restart itself. The human soldier turns to look at me for the first time, and up close I can see the injury at his shoulder, dark and glistening, and the way his jaw is set tight against what must be considerable pain. "Are you hurt?" he asks. The question startles me more than anything that has happened in the last 2 minutes. No one has asked me that in years. People ask about my safety, my schedule, my usefulness to the Dominion. No one asks if I am hurt. "No," I manage. "You are the one who is hurt." "I've had worse," he says, though I do not know if that is true or simply something he says to make me stop worrying about him. He glances down the corridor in both directions, then back at Voss, who is struggling to rise despite his injured leg. "We need to move. Now, not in a minute." "Who are you?" I ask, because it feels suddenly important that I know the name of the man who just stepped into the path of a shot meant for my skull. "Dane," he says simply. "Dane Marlowe. We can do introductions properly later. Right now I need you to walk, and I need you to walk fast." I look down at Voss, at the man who taught me to ride, who stood outside my door every night of my childhood, who has just tried to end my life on the orders of someone I do not yet know. Something in me breaks quietly, without sound, a small private collapse that I do not have time to grieve. "This way," Dane says, and takes my arm, not roughly, but with a firmness that leaves no room for argument. We move together into the darkened side corridor, away from the fallen guards, away from the life I thought I understood an hour ago. Behind us, I hear Voss's voice rise, sharp with urgency now, calling for the fourth guard to return, calling for reinforcements, calling my name in a tone that no longer sounds gentle at all. "Don't look back," Dane says, his voice low. "Looking back slows you down. Trust me on this one thing." I do not know this man. I do not know why he stepped between me and death without asking a single question first, without checking whether I was worth the risk, without waiting for orders or permission or reward. I only know that when the guards I trusted my entire life turned their weapons on me, it was a stranger, a soldier from a world I barely understood, who decided in less than a second that I was worth protecting. We run through the dark together, his hand steady on my arm, his breathing controlled despite the wound in his shoulder, and somewhere behind us, the sound of pursuit begins to grow. I do not know where we are going. I only know that for the first time since the lights went out, I believe I might survive the night. "Stay close," Dane says as we reach a junction of corridors, checking left and right with quick, practiced glances. "And whatever happens, don't stop moving." I nod, though he cannot see me nod in the dark, and I follow him deeper into the station, away from everything I thought I knew about loyalty, and toward a truth I am only beginning to understand. Behind us, the corridor lights flicker back to half strength, just enough to throw long shadows across the walls, and in that dim wash of color, I catch one last look at Voss struggling to his feet, one hand braced against the wall, his weapon still gripped tightly even as his leg fails to hold his weight properly. For a moment our eyes meet across the distance, and I search his face for some trace of the man who taught me to ride, who once carried me through a garden when I was too small to walk the whole path myself. I find only a stranger wearing a familiar face, and the sight of it settles into my chest like a stone. Ithrin, Dane says quietly, using my name for the first time without title or formality, and something about the plainness of it pulls me forward before I can linger any longer on Voss's expression. Whatever you're seeing back there, it can wait. Right now I need your feet moving faster than your thoughts. I force myself forward, matching his pace as best I can, though my legs feel unsteady beneath me, still trembling faintly from the shock of what has happened. The corridor narrows ahead of us, branching into a service passage lined with old cable conduits and dust-covered signage in a script I recognize as an older station dialect, long since replaced by newer standards. "You know where this leads?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know it leads away from them," Dane says. "That's enough for now." Somewhere behind us, an alarm begins to sound, a low pulsing tone that echoes strangely through the metal passageways, and I feel my heart lurch at the sound of it. They are calling for reinforcements. "Then we don't have long," Dane says, and picks up his pace, one hand still steady at my elbow, guiding me around a fallen support strut without ever slowing enough to let the fear catch up with either of us. "Focus on your breathing. In through the nose, slow. It'll keep your head clear." I do as he says, more out of instinct than conviction, and find, to my quiet surprise, that it helps. The frantic pounding in my chest begins to ease into something more manageable, something closer to focus than panic, and I realize that even in the smallest details, this stranger seems to know exactly what a frightened person needs to hear. "How do you stay so calm?" I ask, as we round another corner deeper into the maintenance network. "I'm not calm," Dane admits. "I've just learned how to keep moving anyway. Panic doesn't get you anywhere faster. It just makes the getting there messier." I find, despite everything, that I believe him completely, and for the first time since the lights went out, I let myself hope that we might actually survive whatever the rest of this night still holds. The maintenance level beneath the transit station smells of cooling coolant and old metal, and it is here, in a narrow passage lit only by a single flickering strip above us, that Dane finally stops and lets go of my arm. "Sit," he says, nodding toward a low utility crate. "Just for a minute." "You are bleeding," I say, and it comes out sharper than I intend, because I am angry at him for not saying anything about it while we ran, angry at myself for not noticing sooner how much of his weight had shifted onto his good leg. "I know," he says, already pulling a small kit from a pouch at his belt. "It's not the first time." I watch him work with an efficiency that unsettles me. He does not wince the way I expect a person to wince. He does not ask for help. He simply opens the wound covering enough to clean it, applies a sealant patch from the kit, and closes it again, all while scanning the corridor behind us every few seconds, as if his hands and his eyes belong to two entirely separate tasks that do not interfere with one another. "You should let a physician look at that," I say. "I will, once we're somewhere safe." He glances at me, and for the first time since the corridor, there is something almost like humor in his expression. "You're worried about me. That's new." "You took a shot meant for my head," I say. "I think worry is a reasonable response." He shrugs, and immediately regrets it, his jaw tightening at the movement in his shoulder. "It's the job." "Is it?" I ask, and the question surprises even me with how much weight it carries. "You are not part of my detail. You are station security. You had no reason to step into that corridor at all." Dane is quiet for a moment, checking the seal on his shoulder one more time before letting his shirt fall back over it. "I was on a routine patrol nearby. Heard the comm channel drop out where it shouldn't have. That's not normal. When something that's supposed to work suddenly doesn't, it usually means someone wanted it that way." "So you came to investigate a communications failure," I say, "and instead you found 4 of my own guards trying to kill me." "More or less." He looks at me directly now, and there is nothing soft in his gaze, only a steady, appraising calm. "I didn't know who you were when I stepped into that hallway. I saw 4 armed people cornering one person with no weapon. That's all I needed to know." I sit with that for a moment, turning it over in my mind like an unfamiliar coin. Among my own people, action requires justification. A soldier does not move without orders, without knowing the political weight of the outcome, without calculating what the Dominion gains or loses. Dane acted before he knew my name, before he knew my title, before he knew whether saving me would earn him anything at all. You could have died, I say. You still might, if that wound is worse than you are telling me. Could have, he agrees. Didn't. Let's focus on that instead of the other version. I almost laugh, despite everything, at the strange lightness in how he says it, as if survival were simply a fact to be accepted, rather than a miracle to be marveled at. Then the sound of distant footsteps reaches us through the passage, and the moment of ease disappears as quickly as it came. Dane is on his feet instantly, pulling me up by the arm and guiding me further down the passage, away from the sound. They'll check the maintenance levels eventually. We can't stay in one place too long. Where are we going? I ask, my voice lower now, matching the seriousness that has returned to his face. Somewhere with cameras I can control, and exits I know, he says. There's an old cargo relay 2 levels down, not used much anymore since the station upgraded its main freight lifts. It should be quiet. We move quickly and quietly, and I find myself watching him as much as I watch the corridors around us. There is a particular economy to the way he carries himself, no wasted motion, no unnecessary sound, and yet nothing about him feels rehearsed or artificial. It feels, instead, like a person who has simply had a great deal of practice staying alive, and has learned, through that practice, exactly which movements matter and which do not. Can I ask you something? I say, as we descend a narrow stairwell. You can ask. I might not have an answer. Why do you do this? This work, standing at doorways, walking corridors, watching for threats that may never come. I glance at him. It cannot pay well enough to justify what just happened to your shoulder. He is quiet for a few steps, and I wonder if I have asked something he does not want to answer. Then he says simply, because someone has to, and I'm good at it. That's most of it, honestly. The rest is harder to explain. Try, I say. He glances at me, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. Where I come from, we don't grow up with guarantees. No system decides who protects who from birth. You choose it or you don't. Some people choose it because they want the pay, or the pension, or the story to tell later. I chose it because I don't like standing by while something bad happens to someone who can't stop it themselves. He pauses at the bottom of the stairwell, checking the corridor ahead before continuing. Your guards were sworn to protect you. I wasn't. That's the part that should scare you more than anything else tonight. I do not answer immediately, because he is right, and the truth of it sits heavily in my chest. Loyalty among my people is built into the bones of our society, woven into oaths and ceremonies and generations of tradition. It is supposed to be unbreakable, and yet tonight it broke as easily as glass, while a stranger, with no oath at all, chose, in a single unplanned moment, to risk everything for someone he had never spoken to. We reach the old cargo relay, a wide, dim space filled with the shapes of long, unused freight containers, and Dane leads me behind a stack of crates near the far wall, before finally allowing himself to lean against the metal, just for a moment, his breathing slightly uneven. You need rest, I say. I need a plan, he corrects. Rest comes after. He pulls a small device from his belt, the kind station security uses to interface with local networks, and begins tapping through menus with quick, practiced fingers. I want to see if I can find out what happened to the comm jamming. If someone deliberately cut the signal in that corridor, there should be a record of it somewhere, even if they tried to erase it. You think this was planned in advance, I say, though it is not really a question. I already know the answer, have known it since the moment the lights went out. I know it was, he says without looking up from the device. Random malfunctions don't happen at the exact moment 4 armed guards decide to turn on the person they're sworn to protect. Someone arranged the blackout. Someone arranged the empty corridor. Someone gave the order. He glances at me. Any idea who might want you gone badly enough to plan something like this? I think of the treaty vote scheduled for tomorrow, of the delegates already gathering in the upper levels of the station, of the careful balance of power within the Dominion that has always made my position both an honor and a target. There are many who would benefit from my death, I say quietly. My family's claim to leadership has rivals. Some believe the line should pass to a different branch entirely. If I die here, especially in a way that appears to involve human violence, it could unravel the treaty vote and turn opinion against Earth at the same time. Dane's expression sharpens slightly. That's a very specific kind of convenient. You think this is connected to the treaty, I say. I think it's too well timed to be anything else. He sets the device down for a moment, rubbing at his eyes with the back of his hand, exhaustion finally showing through the calm he has maintained since the corridor. Someone wants you dead, in a way that makes it look like Earth did it. That would kill the treaty and your rivals at the same time, without any of them having to lift a finger themselves. I feel a cold understanding settle into my chest, heavier than fear. Voss, I say, he has served my family for over a decade. If he was willing to do this, someone convinced him it was worth more than his oath. Or threatened him with something worse than breaking it, Dane says. Either way, we need proof, not guesses. Accusations without evidence will just get both of us killed faster, and it'll get your rivals exactly what they want. I look at him, this quiet man from a world I have visited only a handful of times, who now holds more of my survival in his hands than any of the Dominion's sworn protectors ever did. Why are you helping me build a case at all? You could simply get me to safety and let the Dominion handle its own politics. Because getting you to safety once doesn't mean you're safe, he says. If whoever planned this tonight doesn't get caught, they'll try again tomorrow, or the day after, somewhere I'm not standing nearby to step into the way. He meets my eyes, steady and certain. I'd rather finish this properly. There is something in the plainness of his answer that settles something restless in my chest, some old ache I did not know I carried until this moment. My entire life, I have been protected by people bound by oath, by duty, by generations of expectation. I have never once been protected by someone who simply decided, on his own, that finishing the job properly mattered more than his own safety. Then let us finish it properly, I say, and for the first time since the lights went out in that corridor, I feel something steadier than fear beginning to take its place. Dane allows himself the smallest trace of a smile, tired but genuine. That's the first thing you've said all night that sounded like a plan. Somewhere above us, through the layers of metal and old machinery, I imagine Voss and whoever gave him his orders searching the station level by level, growing more anxious with every passage that comes up empty. Good, I think. Let them search. Let them wonder. For the first time tonight, I am no longer only the target of someone else's plan. I am beginning, with the help of a soldier who owes me nothing, to become part of my own. Dane rises from where he has been sitting against the crate, testing his injured shoulder with a small, careful roll that draws a brief wince across his features before settling into something more composed. Before we move again, I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer, not a diplomatic one. All right, I say, curious despite the tension still coiled tight in my chest. Is there anyone in your detail, anyone at all, who you would trust completely right now, without hesitation? He asks. Not because of an oath, because of who they actually are. I consider the question seriously, turning through the faces of every guard, every attendant, every official who has surrounded my life since childhood. The longer I search, the more unsettled I become, because the honest answer is far shorter than I expected it to be. There is one, I say finally, an attendant named Wren Halley. She has served my household since I was a child, though not as a guard. She manages correspondence, schedules, small matters most would consider beneath notice. She has no political ambition that I have ever seen, and she has always spoken to me plainly, even when plain speech was not what my family wished to hear. Would she have any reason to want you dead? Dane asks. None that I can imagine, I say. If anything, my death would leave her without a household to serve at all. Her position exists because of my family's continued place in the Dominion, not despite it. Then she might be useful, Dane says. Someone inside the palace structure who isn't compromised, who can help confirm details we can't verify from down here. He taps at his device again. Do you have any way to reach her that wouldn't go through the same channels Sorel's people might be watching? I think for a moment, and then remember a small detail from years ago. A private frequency Wren once used to reach me during a diplomatic function when official channels had been overwhelmed by the noise of 100 other messages. There may be one, I say. It is old, rarely used, but she kept it active for emergencies. I do not know if she still monitors it. Worth trying, Dane says, offering me the device. Just keep the message short. If anyone is watching for chatter, we don't want to give them anything obvious to trace. I compose a brief message, careful and vague enough that it would mean little to anyone but Wren herself, and send it through the old frequency with hands that only slightly tremble. There is nothing to do afterward but wait, and in the waiting I find myself studying Dane once more, this quiet stranger who has, in the span of a single terrifying hour, become the only person in this entire station I am certain does not wish me harm. Thank you, I say quietly, for treating this like it matters, for treating me like it matters. It does matter, Dane says simply, without any trace of performance in his voice. It always did. Doesn't take a title to know that. The device in Dane's hands casts a thin blue light across his face as he works, and I watch lines of text and old station logs scroll past faster than I can read them. Somewhere in the walls around us, the station continues its quiet hum, unaware that anything has changed, unaware that a princess of the Threll Dominion is hiding behind stacked freight crates with a wounded human soldier instead of standing in her assigned quarters preparing for tomorrow's vote. Found something, Dane says after several long minutes, his voice quiet but sharp with focus. The jamming signal in your corridor wasn't a malfunction. It was routed through a maintenance access node 2 levels up, using a station engineer's credentials. Which engineer? I ask, leaning closer to see the display, though the symbols mean little to me. Name's Perrin Aldis. Works nights, mostly on the eastern corridors. Dane frowns at the screen. But here's the strange part. His access log shows him clocked out 4 hours before the jamming started. Either he came back without logging in again, which the system would have flagged, or someone used his credentials without him ever being there. Someone stole his identity within the system, I say slowly, to hide their own involvement. That's my guess. Dane taps through another few screens. Whoever did this knew exactly how station security logs work, which means they either have access to that information themselves or someone gave it to them. I think of Voss again, of the years he spent walking beside me through official buildings and public appearances, learning the patterns of my life down to the smallest detail. My guard detail would know the routines of this station well. Voss has served on transit escorts for over a decade. He would know which corridors go quiet at which hours, which cameras are old enough to fail without much notice. That fits, Dane says. But knowing the station's weaknesses and being able to hijack an engineer's system credentials without leaving an obvious trace are two very different skill sets. Voss might have picked the location. Someone else built the blackout. Someone working with him then. Someone with technical access. Or someone giving him instructions, Dane says, and something in his tone makes me look at him more closely. You said your rivals would benefit if you died in a way that looked like Earth was responsible. That's not a simple crime of opportunity. That takes planning, resources, and probably more than one person willing to risk everything on the outcome. I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the cool air of the cargo relay. You believe there is someone above Voss directing this? I think it's likely, Dane says. Soldiers loyal enough to serve for a decade don't usually turn on the person they're protecting without either an enormous reward or an enormous threat hanging over them. Someone convinced him this was necessary. I want to know who, We spend the next stretch of time in careful, quiet work, Dane moving through old maintenance logs and access records, while I try to recall every detail I can about the political tensions surrounding my family's claim to leadership. There are several branches of the Dominion's ruling houses who have long resented my father's position, families who believe the leadership should have passed differently generations ago, when the old succession laws were rewritten to favor a direct line rather than a broader council vote. There is one name that keeps returning to my thoughts, I say finally. Chief Delegate Rennick Sorrell. He leads the faction that has argued loudest against my father's policies, and he has never hidden his belief that the succession laws should be reversed. If I die without an heir named, and the succession reverts to open council vote, his faction would have the strongest position to claim leadership. Dane's fingers pause over the device. Would he have the kind of resources to hijack an engineer's access and coordinate an assassination inside a station this size? He has spent years building relationships across multiple worlds, I say. It is not impossible. Then let's see if his name shows up anywhere it shouldn't, Dane says, and returns to his work with renewed focus. It takes almost half an hour, during which I keep watch on the entrance to the cargo relay, while Dane digs through layers of station records, occasionally muttering under his breath about outdated security protocols that should have been replaced years ago. Finally, he goes very still, staring at something on the small screen. There, he says, a private comm channel opened 3 days ago between a station relay and an outside frequency registered to a diplomatic vessel currently docked in the upper bay. The vessel's registration traces back to Sorrell's personal delegation. 3 days ago, I repeat, before my arrival was even publicly scheduled. Which means this wasn't planned in a hurry, Dane says. Someone knew your travel schedule well in advance, knew which corridor you'd be walking through tonight, and had enough time to arrange the jamming, the empty hallway, and whatever convinced your guards to go along with it. I feel the weight of betrayal settle deeper into my chest, colder now than shock, closer to grief. If this is true, then Voss did not simply fail me tonight. He has been planning to fail me for days, perhaps longer. Dane looks at me, and something in his expression softens slightly, though his voice remains steady. I know this is a lot to process all at once, but right now, understanding the plan is the only thing that gives us an advantage. If we know how they built this, we can figure out how to take it apart. How do we prove any of this? I ask. A private comm channel and an engineer's stolen credentials are suspicious, but they are not confessions. Sorrell will simply deny involvement, and Voss, if he survives whatever punishment the Dominion delivers, may claim he acted alone out of some personal grievance. That's the part we still need to solve, Dane admits, but there's something else here that might help. He turns the device toward me, showing a log entry time-stamped only 2 hours before the attack. This is a message sent through that same private channel, right before you left your quarters tonight. I can't access the content without more time and better equipment than I have on me, but the header alone confirms the channel was active right up until the attack happened. If we can get into that message, we might have something that ties Sorrell directly to tonight's plan instead of just circumstantial evidence. Where would such equipment be found? I ask. There's a station communications hub, 2 levels up from here, near the diplomatic docking bay, Dane says. It's usually staffed, but if we can get access during a shift change, there might be a window where we can pull a proper trace on that message without anyone noticing. That is close to where Sorrell's vessel is docked, I say. It will be watched. Probably, Dane agrees, which means we need a way in that doesn't involve walking through the front door. We fall into a careful silence, both of us turning the problem over in our minds. I think of the station's layout, memorized over years of ceremonial visits and diplomatic functions, searching for anything that might offer another path. Then I remember something from my childhood visits to this very station, a detail so small I nearly dismiss it before it fully forms in my mind. There is an old service lift, I say slowly, built decades ago, for staff transporting diplomatic luggage and formal supplies. It connects directly to a storage room behind the communications hub. It was used rarely even when I was young, and I do not believe it has been used at all in recent years since the station modernized its main freight systems. Dane looks at me with something like surprise, and then something like respect. You know this station that well. I have visited it many times over the years for ceremonies I barely remember attending, I say. Some details simply remain, even when the rest fades. That could work, Dane says, already pulling up a station schematic on his device to confirm what I've described. After a moment, he nods. This old lift shaft isn't even listed on current maintenance schedules. If it's been forgotten by the system, it's probably been forgotten by whoever is watching for us too. Then that is our way in, I say, and for the first time since the corridor, I feel something steady beginning to grow inside me, something that resembles purpose rather than fear. We move carefully through the lower levels of the station, following a route Dane pieces together from old schematics and my scattered childhood memories, until we reach a narrow, dust-covered door tucked behind a row of long disused storage lockers. The lift behind it groans in protest when Dane finally coaxes it into motion, its old mechanisms clearly unused for years, but it rises slowly, carrying us upward toward the communications hub. Once we're inside, Dane says quietly as the lift climbs, I need maybe 10 minutes at their systems to pull a proper trace on that message. If anyone comes through while I'm working, we may not get a second chance at this. I will watch the door, I say. He glances at me, something unreadable in his expression. You don't have to do this. I could find a way to keep you somewhere safer while I handle the hub myself. No, I say, and the word comes out with more certainty than I expected. I have spent my entire life being kept safe by other people, Dane. Tonight, that arrangement has already failed me once. I would rather stand beside you and risk what comes than sit somewhere quiet, wondering whether you survived. Something shifts in his expression, quiet and brief, gone before I can fully name it. All right, he says simply, then let's finish this. The lift shudders to a stop, and the door slides open onto a narrow storage room, exactly as I remembered it, dust thick on shelves that have not been disturbed in years. Beyond a second door, I can hear the low hum of active equipment, the communications hub just on the other side, close enough now that I can feel my pulse quicken with the nearness of it. Dane checks the door carefully, listening for a long moment before easing it open just enough to see through. Empty, he whispers. Shift change must have just happened. We have a window, but not a long one. Before we move further, the device in his belt gives a soft chime, and I feel my breath catch at the sound, worried for a moment that we have been discovered. Dane checks it quickly, and something in his posture eases slightly. It's a response, he says, from the frequency you used earlier. I take the device from him, and there, in careful, familiar handwriting translated through the old system, is a short message from Wren. She confirms that palace security has already noticed my absence, that formal inquiries have begun quietly among senior staff, and that Chief Delegate Sorrell visited my father's private office twice in the past week, under the pretense of discussing trade routes, though Wren notes she found his visits strange even then, given that trade matters were never his usual concern. She adds one final line that settles heavily in my chest. Voss requested an unscheduled leave of absence 3 days ago, citing a family matter, though no record exists of him ever taking it. He was preparing an exit, I say quietly, reading the words again, in case something went wrong. That fits everything else we've found, Dane says. This wasn't a decision made in anger or panic. It was planned carefully, step by step, over days. He looks at me. Your friend just handed us another thread. Sorrell visiting your father directly, twice, right before this happened. That's not nothing. It is not proof either, I say, not yet. No, Dane agrees, but it tells us where to look once we're inside that hub. If Sorrell was coordinating this personally, there should be more than one message on that private channel. We just need to find the rest. We slip through together, and the hub opens before us. rows of quiet terminals glowing faintly in the low light, humming with the same private channel record that has led us here through half the underside of this station. Dane moves quickly to the nearest terminal, fingers already working before he has even fully settled into the seat, and I stand close behind him, watching the door, watching the corridor beyond it, watching for any sign that our stolen window of time is about to close. "Come on," Dane murmurs to the screen in front of him, and somewhere beneath the hum of the station's machinery, I find myself murmuring the same thing, silently, hoping that whatever truth lies hidden inside that message will be enough to finally turn tonight's betrayal into tomorrow's justice. The terminal in front of Dane flickers, and lines of encrypted text begin resolving into something readable, slowly at first, and then all at once. I watch his face carefully as he reads, waiting for some sign of what we have found. "There it is," he says quietly, and there is a grim note in his voice that tells me before he says another word that whatever the message contains, it confirms everything we feared. This is from Sorel's private channel, sent directly to the frequency assigned to Voss's personal comm unit. It's time-stamped 2 hours before the attack. He turns the screen slightly toward me. It says the corridor has been cleared, the jamming will begin on schedule, and payment will be delivered once. And I'm reading this exactly as it's written. Once the voice heir's death is confirmed and reported as a human-initiated attack. Hearing the words aloud, stripped of any ambiguity, feels like a physical blow. Not the vague suspicion I had carried since the lights first went out, but plain, undeniable proof that Sorel arranged not only my death, but the specific lie that would follow it, a lie built to unravel the treaty and blacken the reputation of an entire people who had done nothing but stand guard over worlds not their own. He wanted it to look like Earth attacked me, I say slowly, so the vote would fail, and so no one would ever look toward his own ambitions. And it would have worked, Dane says, if I hadn't happened to be walking past that corridor at exactly the wrong moment for his plan, and exactly the right moment for you. I look at him, at the calm focus in his face even now, even with proof of an assassination plot glowing on the screen in front of us, and I feel something settle inside me that is neither fear nor grief, but something closer to resolve. We need to make this known, immediately, before Sorel realizes his plan has failed and adjusts his story before anyone else can see the truth. "Agreed," Dane says, already working the terminal again. The good news is we're sitting inside a communications hub with access to the station's public relay system. The bad news is that using it will alert every security system in this place the moment we do, including whoever Sorel still has watching for us. "Then we should expect company," I say. "We should expect it fast," Dane corrects, "and probably armed." He works quickly, pulling the message and its full routing history into a package that can be broadcast, while I stand watch at the door, my pulse loud in my own ears. Somewhere in the station above us, delegates from a dozen worlds are likely still awake, reviewing final notes for tomorrow's vote, unaware that the proof of a plot against an entire treaty sits 2 levels below them, moments away from becoming public. "I want this sent to every delegate credential currently registered in the station," Dane says, half to himself, half to me, as his fingers move across the display. "Not just station security. If Sorel or anyone working with him tries to intercept a single report, I want enough copies out there that erasing it becomes impossible." "Do it," I say. He presses a final command, and for a moment nothing happens, the terminal simply processing in silence, and then a small confirmation flashes across the screen. "Sent," Dane says. "It's out." Every delegate credential in this station just received a copy of that message, along with the metadata proving where it came from. Before either of us can feel any relief, the door behind us slides open, and Voss stands in the frame, no longer alone. Behind him are 2 other guards I do not recognize, station security uniforms replaced with something plainer, something that tells me these are not station personnel at all, but hired hands brought in from outside for exactly this purpose. "You should not have come this far," Voss says, his weapon already raised, his eyes flicking briefly to the terminal behind us before returning to me. "Whatever you sent, it changes nothing. By the time anyone acts on it, this will already be finished." "It's already finished for you," Dane says calmly, stepping slightly in front of me without seeming to think about it at all. "Every delegate in this station just read a message proving Sorel ordered her death and paid you to carry it out. That's not something you can undo with one more attempt in this room." Something flickers across Voss's face, doubt perhaps, or the beginning of understanding that the plan he committed his loyalty to has already collapsed around him, but whatever hesitation appears is quickly buried beneath something harder, something more desperate. Then I have nothing left to lose by finishing what I started. He raises his weapon fully, and the two men behind him do the same, and I feel Dane's hand close briefly around my wrist, a silent signal before he moves. What follows happens faster than I can properly follow, a blur of motion within the narrow confines of the hub, equipment and cables, and the low hum of terminals forming a chaotic backdrop to something that feels less like violence and more like a carefully controlled storm. Dane moves with the same efficient, unhesitating calm he showed in the corridor hours earlier, closing distance before any of the three armed men can properly aim, using the cramped space of the hub against them rather than trying to fight it. I press myself against the wall near the terminal, watching as he disarms the first hired man with a swift motion that ends the confrontation before it truly begins, then turns his focus toward the second. Voss, watching his hired help fall in seconds, hesitates only a moment before raising his own weapon toward me directly, no longer bothering with any pretense of a clean, deniable death. I see it coming, see the barrel steady in his hand, and for one terrible instant I believe this is the moment everything ends despite everything we have done tonight to prevent it. Then Dane is there, closing the last of the distance between himself and Voss in a single motion, and the shot that Voss fires goes wide, striking the terminal beside me instead of finding its intended mark, sparks scattering across the console as the display goes dark. The struggle that follows is brief but fierce, Voss fighting with the desperation of a man who understands he has already lost everything that mattered to him, his career, his honor, whatever loyalty once bound him to my family before Sorel's offer turned it into something else entirely. But desperation is not the same as skill, and within moments Dane has him pinned against the console, weapon wrenched from his grip and skidding across the floor. "It's over," Dane says, breathing hard now, the fight finally showing on him despite everything. "Your employer's plan is already public. There's nothing left to protect by finishing this." Voss slumps against the console, all the fight draining out of him at once, replaced by something that looks almost like relief, as if some part of him has been waiting for someone to finally stop him from carrying out an order he never truly wanted to follow. "He said it was the only way to save the Dominion from itself," Voss says quietly, not looking at me, unable, it seems, to meet my eyes now that the truth stands so plainly between us. "He said the succession laws were broken, that your father's line had corrupted everything the Dominion once stood for, and that removing you was the only way to force real change before it was too late." "And you believed him," I say, my voice steadier than I expect it to be, though something in my chest still aches at the sound of his confession. "I believed the Dominion needed saving," Voss says. "I am no longer certain I believed the rest." There is little comfort in his words, and I do not offer him any in return. Instead, I turn to Dane, who is already pulling a small restraint device from his belt, securing Voss's hands with the same practiced efficiency he has shown all night. "We need to get this to station leadership directly," Dane says, glancing at me. "A broadcast message is good, but a confession, recorded properly, in front of witnesses who can verify it, that's what actually ends this." "Then let us finish it," I say, and together we lead Voss out of the communications hub, out into a corridor now filled with the sound of approaching footsteps, station security finally responding, alerted at last by the very message that started this final confrontation, arriving not as a threat this time, but as the beginning of everything righting itself. The officers who arrive are led by a senior station commander named Elias Farrow, a broad, steady man whose face shifts from alarm to grim, understanding the moment he sees Voss restrained between us. "Voice air," he says, addressing me with careful formality despite the chaos still evident around us. "We received an emergency broadcast only minutes ago. Every delegate credential in the diplomatic wing lit up at once." "Then you already know what happened," I say. "I know enough to understand this needs to be handled with absolute care," Farrow says, his eyes moving to Voss, then to Dane, taking in the injury still visible at his shoulder. "You're the security officer who filed the initial contact report earlier tonight." "That's me," Dane confirms. "Then you two are about to have a very long conversation with station leadership," Farrow says, though there is no hostility in it, only the practical weight of what must come next. "But first, we need this man secured properly, and we need your statement recorded before anything else happens to complicate matters." As the officers take custody of Voss, leading him away down the corridor with far more caution than aggression, I find myself watching his back until he disappears around a corner, some final part of me still hoping, foolishly perhaps, that this might all resolve into some explanation less painful than betrayal. It does not. I know it will not. But the hope lingers regardless, stubborn and quiet, the way old loyalties often do even after they have been proven false. "You did the right thing tonight," Farrow says to Dane, before turning to organize his officers toward securing the communications hub and preserving the evidence within it. "Whatever comes of this, that much is certain." Dane only nods, saying little, and I notice for the first time just how tired he looks now that the immediate danger has passed, the adrenaline that carried him through the last several hours finally beginning to ebb, leaving behind the plain exhaustion of a body that has given far more than it was ever asked to give. "You should see a proper physician now," I say, "not just field patches." "Probably," he admits, allowing himself for the first time all night to lean briefly against the corridor wall. "Feels strange, though, stopping." "You can stop now," I tell him gently. "It is over." He looks at me, something quiet and searching in his gaze, and for a moment, neither of us says anything further, the silence between us carrying more understanding than words could easily hold. By the time the sun cycle of the station reaches its brightest setting, word of what happened in the lower levels has already spread through every level of the diplomatic wing. Chief Delegate Sorrell is taken into custody before he can leave his docked vessel, his private channel records and Voss's recorded confession leaving no room for the careful denials he had clearly prepared in advance. I am told later that he attempted, briefly, to claim the message was fabricated, but the metadata Dane pulled from the communications hub proved too precise, too clearly tied to Sorrell's own registered frequency, for any argument to hold weight in front of the assembled delegates. Voss is taken as well, though his fate remains unclear to me even now. I do not know yet whether the Dominion will show him mercy for his confession, or whether his decade of service will count for anything against the weight of what he attempted. I find, somewhat to my own surprise, that I do not wish to know the answer immediately. There is a grief in me that needs more time before it can consider questions of punishment. The treaty vote proceeds later that same day, delayed only slightly to allow the full truth of the previous night's events to be properly presented to every delegate in attendance. I stand before the assembled representatives of a dozen worlds, still faintly bruised from a night I do not think I will ever fully stop replaying in my mind, and I tell them plainly what happened. I tell them how my own guards turned against me on the orders of a rival, seeking power through my death. I tell them how a human soldier, bound by no oath to my family, no treaty obligation, no political calculation, stepped between me and a shot meant to end my life without pausing even to learn my name. The vote passes with a margin wider than anyone predicted before last night. I am told that several delegates who had planned to oppose it changed their position specifically because of what happened in that corridor, unable to reconcile Sorel's plan to frame Earth for violence with the plain evidence of a human soldier risking everything to save a life that was never his responsibility to save. Afterward, in the quiet that follows the formal proceedings, I find Dane standing near the edge of the assembly hall, his shoulder now properly treated and bound, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the attention several passing delegates offer him as they leave. "You look like a man who would rather be anywhere else," I say, approaching him. "I'm not used to rooms like this," he admits. "I prefer corridors. Fewer people trying to shake my hand." I laugh, and it surprises me how easily it comes after everything that has happened. "The Dominion wishes to honor you. My father has already spoken of rank, of formal recognition, of whatever reward would properly reflect what you did." "I don't need any of that," Dane says, and there is no false modesty in the way he says it, only a plain, simple honesty that has characterized everything about him since the moment we met. "I did what needed doing. That's the job." "It was not your job," I say gently. "You were not assigned to my detail. You had no obligation to step into that corridor at all." "Maybe not," he says. "But I'm not going to pretend I regret it just because it wasn't written down somewhere as my responsibility." I study him for a long moment, this quiet, unassuming man who changed the course of an entire treaty vote simply by refusing to walk past a hallway where something felt wrong. "Then what do you want, if not rank or reward?" He considers the question seriously, the way he seems to consider everything, without rushing toward an easy answer. "Truthfully, I just want to finish my rotation and go home for a while. See my family. Sleep somewhere that isn't a station corridor for a change." It is such a simple request, so entirely unlike anything my own people would ask for after an act that reshaped the future of an entire treaty, that I find myself momentarily without words. Among the Threll, an act of this magnitude would be followed by titles, estates, formal ceremonies lasting days. Dane asks only for rest and the chance to see people he loves. "You could have anything," I say quietly, "and you ask for so little." "I didn't do it for a reward," he says. "I did it because it was right. Asking for something afterward would make it feel like it wasn't." Something in his words settles deep into my understanding of what loyalty actually means, deeper than anything I learned from watching guards sworn from birth to protect me. My own people are raised within oaths, bound by ceremony and tradition to a duty that is expected of them before they are old enough to fully understand its weight. Dane was bound by nothing at all, and yet he acted with more devotion in a single corridor than 4 sworn guards managed across years of service. In the weeks that follow, as the Dominion works through the difficult process of restructuring my personal guard detail, questioning every soldier who once stood close to me, examining loyalties that once seemed unshakable, I find myself thinking often of that plain conversation in the assembly hall. My father, still shaken by how close the Dominion came to losing both an heir and a treaty in a single night, insists on a permanent addition to my new detail, a liaison drawn from Earth's own forces, someone who can offer the kind of judgment that saved my life once already. I do not need to ask who they have in mind. Dane returns eventually, after his time at home, after seeing whatever family and rest he needed, following that long night in the station's lower levels. He arrives quietly, without ceremony, exactly as he arrived the first time, and takes his place near the edge of my new detail as if he had never left at all. "Back so soon," I say, when I see him again for the first time. "Rotation's up," he says simply, though there is something in the way he says it that tells me this was never only about duty. Standing now before my restructured guard, a mixture of Threll soldiers rebuilt from careful vetting and Earth liaisons assigned through the new treaty provisions, I find myself reflecting on everything that single corridor taught me. My own people built loyalty into oaths, into ceremony, into duty passed down through generations until it became something almost automatic, something that could, when pressure or ambition grew heavy enough, be broken by the very structure meant to make it unbreakable. Dane's loyalty came from nowhere but himself. No oath bound him to me. No ceremony demanded his sacrifice. He simply saw someone in danger and decided, in the space of a single breath, that he would not let harm reach them if he could stand in the way instead. That, I have come to believe, is worth more than any oath ever sworn. Not obedience given because it was demanded, but a choice made freely, and remade again every single day since, to stand between someone and the dark simply because it is the right thing to do. I glance toward him now, standing quietly at the edge of the hall, exactly as he did the very first time I truly noticed him, and I find myself grateful, more deeply than words can properly hold, that on one ordinary night, in an ordinary corridor, a stranger from a distant world decided that my life was worth stepping into danger to protect. Whatever comes next for the Dominion, for the treaty, for the long work of rebuilding trust among my own people, I know now that loyalty freely given will always mean more than loyalty simply demanded. And I know that whatever danger may yet find me in the years ahead, I no longer face it wondering whether the ones standing beside me truly mean to stay. Some of them, I have learned, will stay simply because they choose to, again and again, without ever needing to be asked. Ren visits me later that same week, bringing with her the quiet correspondence and small household matters that have always defined her place at my side, though her manner is gentler now, softened by everything that nearly happened. "I am glad you are well, Voice Heir," she says, setting a small stack of formal documents on the table between us. "I confess I did not sleep properly until I received confirmation you had reached safety. Your message helped more than you know," I tell her. "Without it, we may not have found the proof we needed in time." She seems genuinely surprised by this, and something like quiet pride settles into her expression before she returns to her usual careful composure. "I am pleased to have been of use, then, in whatever small way I could." "It was not small," I say. "None of what happened that night was small." In the formal hearings that follow over the coming weeks, Sorel's defense collapses entirely under the weight of recovered messages, confirmed frequencies, and Voss's own recorded confession. My father, visibly shaken by how close the Dominion came to losing both an heir and a treaty in a single coordinated plot, oversees a quiet but thorough restructuring of succession protections, closing the very loopholes Sorel had hoped to exploit through my death. It is, I am told, the most significant change to Dominion succession law in 3 generations, and I find a strange, quiet satisfaction in knowing that whatever Sorel intended to break apart, his failure instead made stronger. Voss's fate is decided with less certainty than I expected. He is not executed, as older Dominion law might once have demanded, but neither is he restored to any position of trust. He is sent instead to a distant outpost, stripped of rank, permitted only the slow, uncertain path of rebuilding whatever remains of his honor through years of quiet, unglamorous service. I do not know if I will ever fully forgive him. I do not know if forgiveness is even the correct word for what I feel when I think of him now, but I find, with time, that the sharp edge of that betrayal begins to dull, replaced slowly by the steadier presence of those who proved, when it mattered most, that they would not fail me. Dane remains close throughout all of it, a quiet, steady presence at the edge of every hearing, every ceremony, every difficult conversation that follows in the aftermath of that single terrible night. He does not seek attention during any of it, content instead to simply be present, watchful, exactly as he was in the corridor where all of this began. One evening, near the conclusion of the final hearings, I find him standing alone near a wide viewport overlooking the slow turn of the station against the dark backdrop of open space, and I join him there without announcing myself, simply standing quietly at his side. "Do you regret any of it?" I ask eventually, the risk, the injury, the weeks spent tangled in matters that were never truly your concern. He considers the question with his usual careful honesty. "No," he says finally, "not for a moment. Some things are worth doing even when they cost you something. Maybe especially then. I think of my own people's oaths, built from ceremony and tradition, sworn before witnesses and bound by generations of expectation. and I think of this quiet man beside me, who swore nothing at all, and yet gave more than any oath ever demanded of him. Then I am grateful, I say simply, that you happen to be the one walking past that corridor. Me too, he says, and for the first time since that long, terrible night began, I see him smile without any trace of exhaustion behind it, only quiet, simple contentment at having done, without hesitation, exactly what was right. Beyond the viewport, the stars continue their slow, silent turn, indifferent to treaties and betrayals, and the fragile, hard-won peace we fought so hard to protect. But here, in this quiet moment, none of that vastness matters half as much as the steady presence beside me, chosen freely, and renewed, I have come to believe, one day at a time,